It is that time of day again where we get to listen to a book, sit back and relax and practice all of the things great readers do. So it's really important if someone else reads to you, it's okay. I even actually listen to audiobooks sometimes in my ears with someone else reading to me. It's great that you can think about what's going on, make connections, predictions, and all those wonderful things that we're working on. So let's take a look at what happens in this chapter. If you remember correctly, this chapter is called Say Speaks Up, and we had some great predictions that our friend Say, who doesn't talk a whole awful lot, is finally going to maybe say some words. And we talked a little bit too, some of the predictions that you made and the guesses were that maybe now that she's at her house, since we know Humphrey's going home with her this weekend, maybe that she's more comfortable to talk at her house, we thought. I know for me, I'm much more comfortable talking with people I know than in front of other people. I always get nervous if I have to speak to parents or someone else. So that could be part of it too. So let's read. On Friday afternoon, Say's father, Mr. Nasiri, picked us up after school. He had a friendly smile and gentle eyes, but he was as quiet as his daughter. Say lived in a tall building, so Mr. Nasiri carried my cage up 1, 2, 3 flights of stairs to their clean and quiet apartment. Mrs. Nasiri opened the door for us. She spoke to her husband and daughter, but I couldn't exactly understand what they were saying. "Hummy, Hummy," a little voice called out. Say's little brother, Derek, toddled toward the door to greet me. "Say Humphrey," Say gently corrected him. "Hummy," he said. The Nasiris put my cage in the living room right in the middle of a big table, and they pulled up chairs so they could all sit and stare into my cage. It seemed as if they were waiting for something to happen, so I decided to give them a show. First, I spun on my wheel for a while. Then I climbed up the side of the cage and dived down into a pile of soft paper. They were obviously impressed with my performance as they talked quietly. The funny thing is, I couldn't understand a word they were saying. No wonder Say got 100% on all her vocabulary tests. She and her family knew a lot more words than I did. I'm trying to think about why Humphrey couldn't understand, and she knows a lot of words. I wonder if maybe Say speaks another language, because I know that some of our friends in room 119 may have families that speak 2 languages, and when you can speak more than 1 language, you sure know a lot of words, don't you? Let's see what happens next. They finally went to the kitchen to eat dinner. Later, while the rest of the family watched television, Say's mother quietly sat by my cage watching me. She seemed nice. Eventually, it was bedtime for the Nasiris, but after the lights were out, Say slipped out of her room and came back to my cage and whispered to me. I could understand her again. "Now you know my secret, Humphrey," she whispered. "My family doesn't speak English well. My dad does a little, but he's shy about it. Mom hasn't learned any English at all, and Derek's too little." "I understand," I squeaked. "That's why I don't like to talk in class," she explained. "I don't talk like the other kids. I'm afraid they'll laugh at my accent. That happened to me when I was little." And I'm trying to think, I feel like I've seen that happen too, where sometimes when we can't understand someone or we don't know how to act, people laugh. Boy, that sounds hurtful. "But you don't sound different," I frantically squeaked. "I understand you just fine." Unfortunately, she didn't understand me. All she heard was squeak, squeak, squeak. I guess maybe I have an accent too. "But I have an idea that maybe you could help me teach Mom English," Say continued. "Oh, glad to help if I can," I squeaked to her. "You're a real friend," Say replied. See, she understood me after all. The next day, I dozed until late afternoon when Say led her mother back to my cage. "Humphrey only understands English, Mama," Say said. "Speak English. Say Humphrey." Say's mom looked a little frightened. but she tried. Humphrey, she said. Hummy! Derek cried as he raced into the room and climbed up onto his mother's lap. Say, hello, Humphrey, Say gently instructed her mother. Hello, Humphrey, Mrs. Nassiri said. I squeaked hello right back, and she broke into a huge smile. Hello, she said. Good job, I said. Well, things went swimmingly from then on. In a matter of hours, Say's mom was saying, How do you do? Nice to meet you. Would you like some water? I did, thank you. Even when Say and Derek left to go to the store with their father, Mrs. Nassiri kept on talking. I let her know I understood what she was saying by wiggling my whiskers and hanging by one paw from the top of my cage. Good boy, Humphrey, she said. Say and her father were amazed at Mrs. Nassiri's progress when they returned. The family spent the rest of the evening practicing English. First, Say pretended to be a guest at the door. She went into the hall and knocked. Her mother opened the door. Hello, Say, she said. Won't you come in? Then Derek went out into the hall and knocked, and Mrs. Nassiri opened the door and said, Hello, Derek. Won't you come in? He rushed in and toddled right over to the table, shouting, Humphrey, Humphrey! Next, Say convinced her dad to practice English with her mom. What time it is? Asked Mrs. Nassiri. What time is it? Say corrected her. Mrs. Nassiri got it right the second time. Then Dad looked at his watch. 7:15, he answered. Would you like some tea? Mrs. Nassiri asked. Yes, please. I would like some tea, Mr. Nassiri answered. Guess what? They had a tea party right on my table. As a reward for all their hard work, I spun my wheel as fast as my little legs would go, and they all cheered. Later, after the lights were out, Say slipped out of her room to talk to me again. Thank you, Humphrey, she whispered. My mom says she's ready to go to English class now, but I wish you were her teacher. So do I squeaked, and I meant it. There were more English lessons on Sunday, and Say showed Derek how to clean out my cage. Suddenly, the boy began to giggle. Humphrey poop, he yelled. His English was improving too. On Sunday night, Say gathered her family together again. I want to teach you the American song, she said. Then she opened her mouth and began to sing. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? I stood up just like they do in the classroom when the Star-Spangled Banner is being sung, but I'd never heard it sung like that before. Say had the most beautiful voice in the world. It was like a gentle breeze. No, like rippling waters. No, it was beautiful. If only our classmates in room 26 could hear her, which gave me the start of another idea. But I didn't have time to think much at all, because soon the whole family was singing the Star-Spangled Banner, and I squeaked right along with them, even on those high notes. When we got back to school on Monday morning, though I was a little disappointed, Mrs. Brisbane asked Say how things went over the weekend. Fine, said Say, and nothing more. Like Miss Mack said, you can learn a lot about yourself by getting to know another species. But boy, sometimes it's a lot of work. That Monday, I sat in my cage worrying about Say for quite a while when I dozed off. When I woke up, I noticed that room 26 had changed. The bulletin board was covered with brightly colored leaves. The tops of the chalkboards were lined with big paper witches, ghosts, and skeletons. Hanging from the light fixtures were black crepe paper bats. And when I looked to my right, I gasped. A horrible, huge orange face with an evil grin was staring directly at me. I jumped, my heart pounding. Can you figure out what time of year it is? Halloween. And do you think you know what that orange thing was? I think you're right. I think it's a jack-o'-lantern. Let's see. Hey, Humphrey. Don't you like the old pumpkin head? AJ whispered to me from his seat nearby. Look, Humphrey's scared of a little old jack-o'-lantern, Garth said. Scaredy cat, scaredy hamster. I stood up straight and looked as unscared as I possibly could. Quiet, Garth and AJ, said Mrs. Brisbane. Then she quickly returned to a math problem she was writing on the board. Suddenly, I noticed a little movement in the center of the room. A murmur. A change. I looked over and, yes, yes, yes! Say had her hand up. Everyone noticed it, except Mrs. Brisbane, who had her back to the rest of us. Mrs. Brisbane, Heidi called out. Without turning, the teacher said, raise your hand, Heidi. Now, Heidi had her hand raised as well as Say. Well, what is it? Mrs. Brisbane turned to face the class and was obviously surprised at what she saw. Yes, Say, she said. In a loud, clear voice, Say said, may I move the pumpkin away from Humphrey's cage? Mrs. Brisbane looked from Say to the cage and back. Yes, I guess it is a little close. Thank you, Say. Say rose and hurried to my table to push the ugly old jack-o'-lantern away. She didn't say a word, but she winked at me, and I knew what she meant. Heidi, did you want to say something? Mrs. Brisbane asked. Not anymore, she said. You know why Heidi was raising her hand, didn't you? She was trying to tell Mrs. Brisbane that Say had her hand up. Everything went back to normal until the bell rang for recess. As my classmates all scattered and ran toward the door, Garth paused by my cage. Scaredy cat, he muttered. Then he moved the pumpkin right up against my cage again. I puffed out my cheeks as big as I could get them. Oh, it was going to be a long, very long day. And we're at the end of the chapter, which means we get our hamster tips. Tip 7 is when hamsters feel intimidated, and intimidated can mean scared, like something is going to come at them or something, they often puff up their cheeks. Can you make your cheeks puff up? That's what a hamster would look like when they're feeling intimidated. And that again comes from the Guide to the Care and Feeding of Hamsters by Dr. Harvey H. Hammer. And the next chapter is going to be about tricks and treats. I wonder what's going to happen in that chapter. I would love to hear your predictions and your thinking, and we will read more of Humphrey tomorrow.